We're going live.
Your moderator for today's Hangout. This is a 1-hour webinar with Chris Davis, and I'll introduce him in a moment. But let me first say hello to all of you and indicate where we are and who we are and what we're doing. This is a regular convening that is organized by the World Smart City Forum, which is an international collaboration linking 3 Geneva-based international organizations: the International Electrotechnical Commission, which brings together those of us who are concerned about the future of electricity and the grid, and the emerging global standards for the electricity and energy industry. The second organization is the International Standards Organization, ISO, which is one of the UN specialized agencies. And the third is the International Telecommunications Union, which brings together all of the ministries of communications of the national governments of the world, together with the telecommunications companies that provide both wired and wireless services. So those 3 organizations are collaborating together. I encourage you to look at worldsmartcityforum.org and worldsmartcity.org, and you can understand better who we are and what we're doing and how we bring together leaders from around the world in dozens of countries to confer about the issues that we're going to discuss today, particularly about how global standards will be vital to the development of smart cities and smart solutions for our urban communities, whether in the context of energy or transport or water or building systems or any number of other key systems in cities. So we have been convening this program for more than a year and a half, 2 years. We've had 2 special convenings where we brought together leaders in Singapore at the World City Summit. That was, I think, in the summer, 2 summers ago. And then in November last, we convened in Barcelona during the Smart Cities Expo. So the purpose of today's program is to look at the innovations and, in some cases, breakthrough opportunities that are emerging around the smart streets and the smart outdoor environment, particularly around smart streetlights, and how they can become a standards-based global platform, not just for communications and for sensing, but for many other things that we're going to hear about today. So allow me to introduce you to our special guest, Chris Davis, Vice President, Smart Cities of Cimcon Lighting. Chris has 30-plus years experience in smart buildings, clean technology, LED lighting, industrial automation. As the Vice President, Smart Cities, he's focused on Cimcon Lighting's strategy for creating not just a new business, but an opportunity to build an ecosystem of partners. He provides thought leadership, and today is just one manifestation of that. Next week he'll be in Chicago presenting with me, so we have a good partnership with each other. And Cimcon Lighting is an outstanding example of how technology innovators are leading the way around global standards, especially for the smart city. Before he joined Cimcon, he was Vice President Global Strategic Alliances at Schneider Electric, the French-based global organization focused on the future of energy. And he's he was president and board member of Baumüller. And he was with a company called Dapra Marking Systems and another company called Kinetics, which became a part of Philips ultimately. And prior to all of his work in the corporate world, he served as a lieutenant in the United States Navy. He's active in a lot of organizations like Clean Tech Open, the MIT Enterprise Forum in Cambridge, Massachusetts, an organization based in Massachusetts where he resides called the Massachusetts Technology Transfer Center, and so forth. And he has an MBA from Florida State University, a Bachelor of Science Chemistry from Jacksonville University, also in Florida. And we're really pleased that he could join us. And I will remind you that while we have our presentation with Chris, you can send us your tweets those questions that you ask, we encourage you to ask them now, because this will be, when Chris is complete with his presentation, this will be the chance to have your question posed to Chris. I'll serve as the moderator for the question and answer period. And all of this program, the 1 hour program today, will be posted immediately on YouTube, so you'll have a chance to share it with your colleagues who might want to see this and who missed us today. So Chris, I'm handing the ball over to you, and we're excited to hear your presentation. Thanks for joining us.
Gordon, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Hopefully I don't have any technical problems here. I'm not the most savvy sometimes. Welcome to everybody from what we're calling warm and sunny Boston. As many of you may know, we've had a cold wave here on the east coast of the U.S. over the last few weeks, and this is the second day in a row that it's actually been above freezing, and so we're happy for that. A few days ago, the high temperature was in the single digits. That was in Fahrenheit, so that was probably about -25 Celsius. So again, thank you very much. What I'd like to cover today are some trends that we see happening in the smart city space enabled by smart and connected outdoor lighting. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll go through, and at the end I'll leave my contact details up for a few moments. So if you'd like to reach out to me for any future correspondence, or if you'd like a copy of the presentation or whatever, you'll be able to reach me through that. So let me open up the PowerPoint here and get to the beginning. Just take a minute. Oops, I've got to go to screen share first. Do that. All right. All right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. And really what I want to talk about today is some observations that many of us in the smart city space are seeing. And it's really a smart city perspective and what we call at Cimcon Lighting the emerging Internet of Outdoor Things. And sort of a rough agenda here. We'll talk about how smart and connected lighting is sort of the first step, recognized by many to make that evolution, that digital transformation to a smart city. We'll take a high-level look at some smart city applications, particularly those that are enabled by smart and connected outdoor lighting. We'll talk a little bit about the Internet of Outdoor Things, and then we'll talk about a development that Cimcon has going to help cities become smarter, to be able to instrument the physical world and gather data from all those city assets that are distributed across the city landscape. As terms of just a little bit of a summary, as many of you in this space know, the definition of smart cities is very broad. Every city is unique and they have different goals and challenges, but there are probably a number of common denominators with respect to what a smart city is. One is they want to be more competitive from an economic and livability point of view. They'd like to become more efficient in terms of their energy spend and more sustainable in terms of reducing CO2 emissions. They're all looking to become operationally more efficient. How can I do better with less, particularly given the constraints they have with rising cost and lower tax bases and challenges like that. How do I improve public services? That's a big issue. Public safety is big. And then if you want to be competitive as a city, you've got to look at how can I make the city a hub for economic development. And then for the citizens, the residents, the workers, how can I improve the quality of life and the mobility, make it easier to get around. So these are some of the high-level things that many of us talk about all the time. How do we help enable these? So cities really have to provide a variety of services. You see some listed here, city lighting, parking, traffic, air quality, waste management, public safety. These are just a handful of many drivers that cities are looking to provide. The challenge they have is, like, where do they start? And then more importantly, what's the business case? How do I pay for it? And so what we're seeing in this space is that as cities go on this smart city evolution and take baby steps and then start to walk and then, you know, run, there are many different ways to achieve their end goal. So there are a lot of different things to talk about in this space. We at Cimcon and many others feel that smart and connected outdoor lighting is really the first step to a smart city. And most cities look at lighting as a good starting point because, one, it's a substantial portion of their energy spend. Outdoor lighting is anywhere from 30 to 40% typically. And so they're looking to be more efficient and they're looking to manage those assets better. So let's look at some of the dynamics around that. The business case for smart lighting is sort of broken down into two sides. And unfortunately, many cities and utilities don't really, at least historically, they've not really looked at what are the life cycle cost of outdoor lighting. Because they're oriented around annual budgets, they often focus on what is the CapEx. And we've done some work. These numbers also hold true in high performance and smart buildings. But if you look at the life cycle cost of a building, or you look at it in terms of outdoor lighting, about 20% of the life cycle cost is what we would call CapEx. That's the engineering, design, financing, acquisition of the lighting, and the installation. Surprisingly, and most cities don't focus on this, about 80% of the life cycle cost is really energy and operational cost, the maintenance, the repair, the operations. So we at Cimcon try to focus on how can we help cities through smart controls save money on the CapEx side, but more importantly, realize the benefits and reduce the OpEx expenses, which could run anywhere from 10, 15, or 20 years. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but if you look at what are the deliverables that smart lighting provides, they come from 5 or 6 different areas. The first is energy efficiency, and numbers from the Energy Information Agency of the Department of Energy say that if you upgrade your legacy lighting to LEDs, you're going to save about 50% on the energy spend. If you add controls, so you can more effectively dim and brighten lighting, you can save, depending upon your policies, you can save about another 10, 20, in some cases 30%. Now, if you use less energy, there's a sustainability carbon reduction impact. But if you go back to the previous slide, I think the big factor that really plays in terms of adding controls, having smart and connected lighting, is really the maintenance, repair, and operation, and the management of the assets. Most lighting controllers have revenue grade power meters, diagnostics on the edge, the ability to send alarms and alerts. So you really have a real-time, constant understanding of what this performance of the assets is. So that really delivers an ROI. And then, of course, if you have better quality lighting at the right brightness, where it is and when it needs to be bright or dimmed, there's a public safety aspect, and that relates to the quality of life. So many people, including us and the market, the industry, think that, you know, the real on-ramp, sort of the gateway drug to a smart city, is lighting due to the economics. So here's an example. Lighting control system that we provide helps automate maintenance and repair dispatching. So if you have an intelligent lighting controller up on a luminaire, if the controller detects some fault or failure, it sends an alert to the cloud-based software. A notification is sent to a command center, and the software can also send an automated repair ticket to either the utility or the lighting maintenance company. So the repair personnel can be dispatched with the right parts and the right tools to eliminate multiple trips to the pole. And what happens today in many cases, if there's a failure of an outdoor street light, a citizen calls, or you have two guys in a truck driving around and they say, oh, this light is out. So they tie a yellow ribbon around the pole and they make a note on a clipboard, and they get back to the office and they say, okay, this light's out, somebody go check it out. So the guys go out in a bucket truck and they say, okay, this light is not working correctly. And, oh, I don't really have the right tools or parts to fix it. And so they might have to make a third truck roll. And in some cases of high traffic areas, you have to have a traffic detail. So the cost to visit the pole each time, depending upon who you talk to, are anywhere from $100 to $300 to $400, again, depending on whether you need the cop there. So the average number of truck rolls here in North America to fix a broken street light is 2.6, where if you have an intelligent lighting controller talking over a network and providing these capabilities you see in the slide, you can reduce that down to 1. So think of the cost savings. Now, the next section I'm going to talk about are some smart lighting mobile applications that came to us from customers. And I think they show the potential to start to utilize this smart and connected lighting infrastructure and the networks you have in place to do other things. And I'm going to go through a couple of examples. The first one comes from a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania. And we were talking to them about putting in street light controllers on the streets and roadways and the campus walkways. And they said, okay, we kind of get that. We get the energy savings, we get the efficiency, we get the better quality lighting, we get the ability to dim, but we have another problem. And that problem is campus safety. With declining enrollments, we want to attract students, and we want to let the parents and the students know that it's really a safe place to come. So today we put in these blue button kiosks, these stands where if somebody feels like they're in danger, they run to the stand, they push the emergency button, it generates an alarm, it dispatches campus police. For us to install each one of those is about $35,000 to $40,000 when you look at engineering cost, design cost, trenching and construction, erection cost, and the equipment, and then the ongoing maintenance and power. So if we have your lighting deployed and we've got this smart and connected mesh network that the lighting controller runs on all over the campus, what can we do? So we developed a smartphone application we call the Blue Button Emergency Alert. And the whole idea is that each student would download to their smartphone this Blue Button application. And if they feel like they're in danger, all they have to do is push the blue button on the display or shake the phone vigorously 3 times in a row. And so what that does is that we know where the student is because the phone has a GPS. That information is transmitted over a cellular connection, as you can see on the bottom of the slide, up to our application, which runs in the cloud. The application then does 2 things. One, it flashes the lights in the vicinity of where the person is, makes them brighter because we know where the lights are because the light controllers have a GPS in them. And we also dispatch campus police at the same time. So really good. And the benefit for the university is there was a large deferment of capital cost, $38,000 a kiosk. They could realize revenue from it, charge each student $5 a year or whatever. And it just allows for much faster emergency response and a much more granular response anywhere on campus. Both the lights and the person in distress are mapped to each other because all the devices have GPSs. So we thought that was pretty cool. And that application has been deployed in a few places. We had described this application to a Metro Boston area police department, and they said, well, if you could do that, we have another idea for you. And could we have a first responder app in our town? So if a police officer is making a traffic stop and pulling somebody over, could you brighten the LED lights to their brightest level? Because typically cities install LEDs. They run them at 60, 70, 80% brightness because that's bright enough. So as the police officer approaches the vehicle that he's pulled over, he can bring the lights up and get a better look at the person in the car. Is there a bad guy in there or not? And we said, we can do that. And they said, well, if you can do that, what about if we actually have an accident scene? Could you do the same thing so that the first responders can brighten the lights so they have better visibility if they're doing, you know, a rescue operation with ambulance and, you know, jaws of life and things like that. So again, here was another public safety smart city application that's enabled by having the smart and connected street lights in place. No additional hardware, just a little bit of software, and develop a smartphone app. So rapid development. And so we think that there are going to be a number of applications that today are unknown or unarticulated. They're going to come to the fore, enabled by having this smart and connected lighting infrastructure in place. So talked about a couple of smartphone apps. Let's talk about some other things that you can do if you have smart and connected lighting in place. And these relate to providing better public services, quality of life, economic growth, and revenue generation. So let's look at two. The first one is small cell metering, and the second is EV charging metering. So Cimcon worked with Pacific Gas and Electric in the city of San Jose, California, to install 250 small cells. These are cellular connection stations that are provided by AT&T. And as you can see here from the illustration, they're pretty nice looking. We call a smart pole. So in this case, the streetlight pole accommodates two controllers from Cimcon. One, a lighting controller on top of the luminaire, and then another revenue grade wireless power meter that measures the energy consumption of the small cell so that Pacific Gas and Electric can bill AT&T for the energy that it uses. These have been deployed mostly around the San Francisco 49ers, Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, and other high density areas where when you have a game going on, all the cell connections get knocked out. So this is something that's been deployed 250 to date, and Pacific Gas and Electric is planning to deploy across their service area another 1,000 of these in 2018-2019 timeframe. So again, revenue grade powering, meaning of small cells, which generates revenue and provides better quality of public services. The next one is EV charging stations. So Pacific Gas and Electric came to us and they said, well, if you can develop a revenue grade power meter for billing for small cells, we're going to be deploying throughout our service area in Silicon Valley EV charging stations. So we've also developed a transformer rated power meter for EV charging stations. So again, these are some of the applications that help make cities smart. Now, this is an application that is enabled by smart and connected lighting, not on the pole, but near the pole. And this came from a city in New York. We were talking to the mayor, and he said, you know, I get this lighting, I get the energy efficiency, I get all that, but I have a problem. And that problem is I have about 1,000 zombies in town. Of course, people that were sitting around the table with him said, well, what's a zombie? And he said, a zombie is a vacant, unpowered building, and they're a public safety problem. Homeless people sleep in them. They're often vandalized, and they catch on fire. And so we had an instance in town of 2 zombie buildings catching on fire. They burned to the ground. There was damage to adjacent properties. So it'd be really nice if we had this mesh canopy, this smart and connected street lighting network in place. Could you develop a battery powered wireless smoke detector fire alarm that sits and runs on the same network as the streetlights? And so we are in the process of developing that. And the whole idea here from the mayor was, one, public safety. I can dispatch the fire department and rescue if necessary much faster and I can charge the property holder, the lien holder, a fee, a monthly monitoring fee. So here we have a revenue source. So $50 a month times 1,000 buildings times 12, significant amount of money. So again, another type of revenue application enabled by smart and connected lighting. So this is really starting to get to what we call the Internet of Outdoor Things. So if you look at the various types of applications that cities can deploy, many cities are looking at, how do I start to instrument and put controls and sensors on all those assets that I have out there? And how am I able to gather that data and get it back and use that data to manage more effectively, like I'm doing with the street lighting and like I'm doing with smart meters if the utility has those deployed. So there are a number of applications, and we've talked about some of them in the earlier slides. Cell tower metering, the blue light special for campus safety, smart lighting. But let's talk about some of the other things that are being done, which you see on the right side of this slide. So the real challenge is, how can we help cities through the Internet of Outdoor Things start to monitor the physical world and gather those little bits of data from all those physical things called city assets? How can we help them deploy this instrumentation on or near the pole? And how can we provide meter powered so that they solve the battery problem? The streetlight pole, that vertical infrastructure, is a really good source of power. So how can we use that power that's there to supply metered power to devices that are on or near the streetlight pole? We'd also like to have the capability to have edge processing to do more of the work outside, near where the asset is. And then if I start to deploy a lot of instrumentation, controls, and sensors across an urban landscape, how do I manage those devices? How do I download firmware to them? There are obviously big cybersecurity considerations, and you need to be able to get that data back via various means and methods. What are the communications, wireless or otherwise? From a business point of view, looking at cities, these types of devices that would enable this need to be affordable. They need to deliver value today and in the future, need to support existing needs, but how can we help support new and future applications that cities will come up with? I refer back to the examples of the zombie building and the smart campus. How can I take advantage of that investment that I've made in the lighting network? How can I let the city choose, or the utility choose, a particular device, sensor, or controller? It's got to be ruggedized for outdoors. How can I make it portable? And how can I provide a platform, an ideation platform, an innovation platform for new use cases? Sort of relates to bullet point number 2. So Cimcon is embarked on something that we call the Near Sky. And this is a way to enable better outcomes for cities. And the reason we call it Near Sky is we're trying to occupy and colonize that space somewhere a little bit below heaven, but to Earth. So it's something you can reach by a wire or a ladder. So it's controllers, it's sensors, it's instrumentation, it's the wireless network. So how can we help cities sort of aggregate and normalize data from some of the devices that you saw in the prior slides, these data sources, including people? And how can we help provide power? How can we provide computing? How can we provide measurement? How can we provide metering? And then how can we move that data through open APIs to support applications like enhanced public safety, real-time awareness of what's going on in the city, lower cost, improved emergency response, and resiliency? So how can we help cities through various applications that you see there have better business outcomes? So we have developed, and this is a prototype. We call this the Near Sky 360, and it's really a digital city data hub. And the whole idea is that streetlights are ubiquitous. They're across the urban that's on top of the streetlight. Normally a controller or a photocell plugs into that. We take this near sky hub that has a male connector on the bottom and then another 7-pin female connector on the top. And so we sandwich it between the street light controller and the street light. And it has a number of capabilities, which I'll cover here in the next slide. So, and again, what you're seeing here is not the final version. This is a working model, but this particular version that we're showing does a number of things. One, we have the ability to get power from the street light, so we can provide power AC out. So an example of that would be environmental sensor array that would be on the pole with a single cable to provide power and communications. We also have other ports for communications and power. We support Ethernet, USB version C, serial port for more types of industrial types of instrumentation, 24-volt power supply, analog and digital input. So we'll develop a whole family of these. The Near Sky 360 device can take advantage of the communications networks, the mesh networks that's supported by the street light controller. So that would be Zigbee, Cisco, Itron, Silver Springs, or in the case of the Near Sky 360 device, we also have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi communications in it, and can also provide cellular connection if necessary as a single board Linux computer, a GPS. So it's really very, very capable. So it's almost like a little data center on a streetlight pole out on the edge. I think Cisco calls that fog computing. So here are some examples of some smart city services enabled by this. You see parking, so you would probably have a Bluetooth or connection to that, low energy Bluetooth. The streetlight controller itself has a tilt sensor in it, and what that's used for in areas where you have snow, if a snow plow or an accident knocks the pole over, we know that the pole's gone down. The Near Sky 360, as I said earlier, has power over Ethernet capability in USB, so we could provide power and communications for digital media signage. We talked about earlier metering of EV charging and so on and so forth. So a lot of capability. In addition to the Near Sky 360 hardware device, Cimcon is developing what we call the Near Sky View, which is a software platform. And the whole idea is to gather data in a very secure, robust, easy way from all these Internet of Outdoor Things devices, sensors, weather stations, environmental sensors, cameras for video, etc., and either communicate that over Wi-Fi, an Ethernet port, or cellular, or in some cases, if the data rates are low, over the mesh networks that the streetlight controller supports, to the Near Sky platform. So ingest data through the Near Sky 360 and the Near Sky View domain, and then export relevant data to municipalities, their network operations centers, third-party consumers, and business partners who would develop to this platform. So this is an exciting area, and if any of you on the webinar are interested in learning more and potentially collaborating with us, we would be happy to hear from you. So we're really looking at, providing here a very innovative platform for urban problems. We call it the Internet of Outdoor Things. The slide you've seen before, so I won't go over it again. But it's really, taking advantage of the fact that lighting is the gateway to a smart city, where you start out with a dumb light pole, you put controls on it to improve the energy efficiency and the management of the asset. You add this city sensor platform, the Near Sky 360, and start to build out a whole suite of smart city applications to deliver better services, new revenue streams, and foster economic development. So we have many utilities in cities we're talking to who are saying, this is great because we can take an asset which was a cost center and now start to use it to generate revenue and deliver better public services. So with that, I'll close. I'm sure we have some questions and answers, hopefully. I would draw your attention to my email address. So if you'd like to reach out to me for anything, please do. It's chris.davis@cimconlighting.com. And I would direct your attention to a white paper on our website, Cimcom's website, Today's Cities Getting to Smart. So it's available for download. So with that, I'll just leave the slide up for a moment and pass it back to Gordon.
Thank you, Chris. That's really outstanding and a lot of questions. So we have the remainder of the hour, about 25 minutes to get into the questions. I'll start maybe with a broad question about what's happening in the realm of utilities, who are obviously crucial in this, but also their interaction with cities and the city government, who regulate the environment of the city. Even if the city doesn't own the outdoor streetlights, they may have other utility poles. And more importantly, they are a key customer of the utility and are involved in some fashion, maybe directly or indirectly, in regulating or permitting the environment for modifications that happen within the city limits. And so I guess, one question that's come up in prior programs that we've convened, like these 1-hour programs or in our bigger conference programs or in the discussions that we have around our blog, one of the questions is the interface and the interaction between the utility, whether it's privately owned or not, and the city government. And have you seen in your effort to try to improve the outdoor and create the Internet of Outdoor Things, have you seen ways in which that interaction maybe can be improved or is improving? Maybe some tips for those who are listening and involved in this process, either from the public sector side or from the utility side?
Yeah, Gordon, you raise a very good point. And I think what's happened over the last 1 to 2 years is that many utilities realize that they have a role to play in helping cities move from where they are today to being smart. And what you find is that there are some utilities that are fairly progressive and others that aren't, but I think all of them are starting to get it. And if you go to the conferences like Distributech, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks, and the IES Street Area Lighting Conference, which is in October, you're seeing utilities starting to get involved. And some of the more progressive ones that we've seen, Avista, obviously out in the Northwest, Duke Energy, National Grid, TEPCO is another one. They all realize that there's a role to play. And so what we're seeing is that the smarter, let me turn the volume down on that. You're seeing that the smarter utilities are realizing that if you're going to help a smart city, they're kind of four major players. You need to have the utility involved. You need to have technology companies, Cimcon, Cisco, others. You need to have the city involved, and typically there is an energy service company or an overall product management company, Black & Veatch, Johnson Controls, Honeywell, etc. So they're really getting it, and some are more progressive. And I know Duke, they have a whole innovation ideation group that's really focused on how can they, as a utility, deliver smart city services, some of which you saw in this presentation, and make money off of it in an unregulated environment. So hopefully that answers the question. They are definitely getting the message. Are we connected?
Sorry, it got muted. You talk about the interface between city government and utility. What about the interface between the owner of the outdoor streetlight, who you're working with, and the real estate developer, owner, operator, who, for instance, on a university campus or in a corporate campus or in a special zone like a central business district, are there some issues that you've been able to work out in some of your projects where that key city actor who owns the real estate plays a role in the deployment and development of what you're describing as the Internet of Outdoor Things?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's some basic questions to ask, and I don't know why this is getting feedback. Turn that down. Can you still hear me?
Yes. We can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. So the basic question to ask is who owns the pole? Who owns the light? Who maintains the light? And who pays the energy bill? And so you have to have all the animators, all the actors involved in doing these things. And you definitely find that, as I said earlier, utilities are becoming much more involved and progressive. Oftentimes, if you're looking at a campus or a commercial industrial site, they have the ability to go ahead because they own the pole, they own the light. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Each one's different, so you have to sort of figure out what's the roadmap and what's the goals, what are the challenges, and then what's the best collaborative business model. So I am a strong advocate of the fact that I think to help cities, to help innovation districts move to become smart, you're going to need a new collaborative business model that may not exist before. And that involves, who does what, and also who pays and who finances. And if there's revenue generated, how is that shared? So every deal is individualized, but you raise a good point. Everybody needs to be involved. And if one person says no, then you've got a tough roadblock to get over.
Good, that's helpful. And now a few questions that have come in the last few moments. What applications can you imagine for the Global South, the developing countries? Our next World Smart City Forum event is going to be oriented toward the Global South, what we used to call the developing world. But I guess maybe you could speak to this, whether and how and where in that realm there are some special applications, perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe all cities, Global North and Global South, are really the same when it comes to applications that can be built on top of your platform.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's interesting. In the last, I would say, 6 to 12 months, we're seeing increased interest in smart and connected lighting. And we did a soft launch of the Near Sky 360 device and the Near Sky View the last couple of months. And it's interesting that most of the interest is coming from outside North America in terms of, we're all in, tell us more, let us pilot. Because again, this product is being developed. It works, but it's not the final version. And so what we're seeing is traffic. Traffic counts is an interesting one. A lot of public safety apps having this node support video and video analytics. A lot of folks are really interested in the public safety campus type apps. And as a matter of fact, we're working with Silver Spring Networks in Jamaica Public Services. Their goal is to have a smart nation. So we're deploying 35,000 streetlights there in phase 1, and then there'll be 105,000 total. But as those later phases get started, Jamaica wants to know how can they deploy this to solve some problems. Flood monitoring is an example. How do you, like in the Caribbean, how do you improve the resiliency of the grid and the network? So there's just a lot of applications. So what we're finding, I think, is that there's probably a more pressing need in the emerging economies. And they're not bashful about coming up with ideas. Can you do this? Work with us on that. What do you think? So the jury's still out, but those are some of the types of applications and use cases that we're seeing.
On that list for 2018, which 2 or 3 would you put on top? Traffic, public safety? Which ones rise to the top for 2018 for you as far as the pressing needs that you're helping to solve when cities sign a contract?
I would say public safety is probably on top of the list. So that's video and video analytics. People counting is a big one, because that can help drive economic development. Parking is another big application, traffic management. Because if you have, smart parking and good traffic, then that promotes the movement of economic, the fast movement of economic goods and services through a city, right? That also relates to public safety. So, those are probably top of the list. Some cities like the ability to do air quality monitoring. And what I didn't point out is that Near Sky 360 device is very portable and very flexible. So, for example, the capital of Rhode Island, Providence, they have a working port. There's always highway construction there. They're interested in air quality monitoring, and so they'd like to be able to move the air quality monitor from site to site. So the Near Sky 360 device can very easily be unplugged and put the streetlight controller back into the streetlight, and then you can move it someplace else. So air quality is a big one. We're starting to see stuff on infrastructure monitoring around earthquakes in those earthquake zones. So like I say, I think the jury is still out in terms of which applications will come to the fore, but those are the ones that we're getting the most noise about today.
When you were talking about Near Sky 360 during your presentation, you were describing how you're looking to help aggregate and normalize data sources within the city and the power of open APIs in that process. Can you talk about other standards-based systems and solutions that are helping to accelerate the adoption? Because a lot of our participants in organizations like ISO are very interested in the standards question, and you folks, have had to essentially adapt to a world where there are a few standards, but they're not universal.
Yeah, I'm not well prepared to talk about standards. I don't know a whole lot about them, to be frank, but I think what we're seeing is that if you look at these Internet of Outdoor Things, sort of M2M, machine-to-machine IoT platforms, the direction in terms of development kind of fits around two platforms, Microsoft Azure and then Amazon IoT Web Services. And the whole notion is that you need to be able to gather, data from these distributed devices through various means and methods, and then publish that data to other applications. So there are a number of smart city platforms out there that we would communicate with. And so I don't know if you'll have, formal standards, but I wonder if, this will evolve to a couple of de facto standards. Looking at some of the applications that we showed in the earlier slide, you've got Cisco has Kinetic, Verizon has ThingSpace, there's Open Data Soft, there's Exact, so there's a lot of platforms out there, right? So the whole idea, it's kind of analogous to my prior life of being in smart factories and high performance buildings. It's how do you integrate the legacy systems? How do you integrate the public databases? And how do you integrate this real-time data coming from the city assets to provide information so that cities can manage by facts? And so I'm not sure if it's possible to really have a set of standards around that, because it's very heterogeneous, it's very complex. If we were talking to a city in Massachusetts, they're looking at doing smart street lighting and piloting some of the applications that we talked about. This is a small city of 100,000. They have 26 different legacy IT, databases. So they don't need information from all those to be a smart city, but some is relevant. So how do you figure out where this stuff is coming from and what are the interfaces and the APIs? It's not an easy challenge.
Sorry about that. Some of our participants are very interested in the long term and looking ahead beyond short term and medium term. And they are interested in ways that perhaps a company like yours could evolve to compete with the telcos, because you're essentially creating a wireless mesh network that can become a communications platform, and effectively that's what it is already. But you're not selling to the consumer, a service, unless, of course, that may evolve in the way that your intelligence that you're developing and sensing for the city is transmitted in some fashion directly to the person holding a handheld device. Is there a pathway toward that long term that you can foresee for Cimcon?
Well, absolutely. We kind of joke internally that we're a networking company without our own network. And the example I would provide is that if you look at our streetlight controllers, we support a number of these wireless mesh networks. We started out with Zigbee. We have streetlight controllers that run Silver Spring Network and Cisco and Itron. And then we also support 2 point-to-point wide area, low power wide area networks, Ingenu RPMA, and we're working on LoRa WAN with Comcast. So we'll support the networks that are going to be out there, and you'll have a mix of them. I mentioned that in the Near Sky 360, we could put a cellular connection there. So as the telcos come out with 5G and narrowband IoT, lower cost cellular connections that are optimized for these types of data gathering, we'll support that. So in many cases, we're a customer of the telco. Our gateway, for example, that we use for our Zigbee streetlight controllers uses cellular or network backhaul. So we work with all the telephone companies that you know. So I think the real point is that support what's going to become prevalent. I think the verdict is out, or the jury's out. There's no verdict yet. Is it going to be unlicensed spectrum, the mesh networks, or is it going to be licensed spectrum cellular? Which will prevail? Don't know. But because of our development capability, we have the ability to quickly develop communications capability for what is required.
So I guess this begs the question about regulation. Are there any national or local regulations that if you had a magic wand, you would either erase or improve so that it would accelerate the adoption and deployment of these technologies? Is there, one or two on your hit list that you would want to see go away, or one or two that should be introduced that would encourage the adoption?
That's a great question, something I've not thought of, Gordon, so I'll have to ponder that a bit. But the first thing that comes to mind is that if you're working with utilities and you're trying to move to smart cities and provide some of these services that were described in the presentation, how do you get those out of the purview of the Public Service Commission or the Public Utility Commission? So how does the utility and/or city or energy services company, whoever's involved, the animators, how can they provide these services if they're on the streetlight pole without having to go through the Public Service Commission to have a rate put in place? So I would say that would be one thing that would probably be useful. I'm sure Pacific Gas and Electric Duke. I mean,
very good one.
What do you think?
Now, I think that the utilities are thinking about becoming telcos, and if your technology enables these new streetlight solutions and the systems built around the streetlight to become the basis for a wireless communications network, a mesh network, they would like to be able to provide that, and would maybe be encouraged to deploy this if they knew that they could also perhaps deliver either data or voice or video communications on that network that suddenly materializes when they've installed your systems.
Right. Yeah, I think the issue is there are a couple of issues. One is so if you're looking at instrumenting that physical world and gathering data from whatever the city or utility asset is, the question is, how much data is there going to be, right? So that says, okay, how much do I gather and how often do I gather it? And then the second consideration is, what is the latency? If I gather it, how soon do I need it? And so I think what you'll find is that, certain applications will gravitate to those networks which optimize performance and cost, right? So that's one consideration. And then the other is, what's the cost to haul that data back? So I think that, if, and the third issue is, I'm just thinking through this here sort of as we brainstorm. The third issue is, how do I get that data? How do I share it? And I just lost what I had in my mind.
All right. Well, I'll give you a chance to recover that while I maybe pose, one of our ultimate questions to you, which is, looking ahead in 2018 into the overarching realm of smart cities, which includes what you're doing and autonomous vehicle technologies and other things that you're not doing. What's the big trend line for the smart cities industry? Is it getting more serious about finance? Is it getting more serious about public engagement? Is it getting more serious about the city government as the prime mover, or the utility as the prime mover? Is there, a big trend or two that you see coming in 2018 that will kind of mark the year?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a number of big, smart street lighting projects that are out there right now. And I think what you're finding is that the cities are saying, I have, my budgets are limited, so we've got to find ways for these smart city deployments to pay for themselves. So I think the biggest trend is going to be focused on what is an individual city's goals, objectives, challenges, and gaps, and then how do you put the right business and financing model together? And there are a number of institutions and high net worth investors who are looking for a better return than they can get in the, let's say the stock or bond market, and they're saying, okay, we'll finance these type of projects as long as we can get a return. And they also want to be, impact investors. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. The biggest trend is that you're going to see much more collaboration and less of a, it's us versus them, moving more toward, we're going to work together. We're going to work together.
Well, that is an ideal answer for us, because we think of the World Smart City Forum as a place where those kinds of collaborations are made possible, since we have 3 international organizations that are non-commercial, that are trying to encourage public-private partnerships and the collaboration across the various boundaries. This is why we organize these 1-hour sessions with somebody like you to bring in the world's best experts, and we're trying to enable those in our community who are leaders, either elected and appointed leaders in government or private sector leaders, and occasionally non-governmental organization leaders to come together and find that point of collaboration. So that's our theme. Maybe you have a final word in the last minute, just to give people something to chew on for the rest of their day, something that maybe you had wanted to say and realize now you didn't, but this is your last moment.
Okay, my last moment. So I think smart cities is a very exciting space. It's clearly evolving, and I think that the objective that I would have, and I have this for myself and hopefully Cimcon, is that we're very open-minded and that we're willing to look at new ideas and new ways of doing things. And, I would encourage everybody to, be inquisitive, go to the conferences, network. You can get a lot of really great ideas, as I've shown from the presentation. Internally, we call that sealing with pride. And you find that there's just a lot of working together. People are just really glad to help each other, because cities that they compete, but they're really willing to share and and collaborate. So I think that's what I would encourage everybody to do, is just be open-minded, learn. It's a great space to be in. It's a lot of fun. I find the more I learn, the less I know in this space. And you've asked some really good questions that I don't think so much on the regulatory or standard side. So obviously I need to think about that a little more. So I just say be open-minded and inquisitive, and focus on learning.
All right, that's a good mandate for all of us, Chris. Thanks to you for spending an hour with us. Thanks to our network for logging in. We'll be posting this on YouTube. We'll be looking for more of your comments and questions on the Twitter feed. We'll be asking you to check out our website, worldsmartcity.org, to see the blogs that we're posting in the coming days. We'll be announcing a new one of these 1-hour hangouts for you soon. And on behalf of everybody, on behalf of Sylvia, who's put this together, Chris, who joined us today, many thanks to all of you, and we'll sign off now. See you soon next time. Bye-bye.